Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. I'm out here in the bush at a spot that I have come many times, and you've seen this background or something similar to it, depending on the time of year, lots of times. What I have for you is a fixed blade review. This is a fixed blade that has quickly become one of my favorites. Let me just get the camera secured, and then, there we go. Let you take a look at this. So what we have here is the Reeve Knives Nyala. This is a knife that has quickly become one of my favorites. Now let me just share a couple of my preferences so that you'll kind of get where I'm coming from here. I have found that about a 8.5-inch, 4-inch bladed fixed blade is about my preference. That's sort of my sweet spot. Sorry, I'm moving around a little bit, but I've got to adjust a couple of things here, and some knives are about to fall. Anyway, so I found that my preference is for knives about this size. So, let's say 3.5 to 4.5-inch blade length, a little stockier in the build. I tend to enjoy that. I don't find myself needing to chop that much with a knife, and so I tend to like something that I can maybe do a little bit of fire prep with, some batoning, maybe some bushcrafting stuff, and still do food prep all in one shot, so that when I'm going out to the bush, I can carry one knife, a hatchet, and a folding saw, and kind of get everything done with that. And so any kind of chopping or major wood processing, I'm going to do with the hatchet or the saw, not my knife. And that allows me to have something a little smaller and a little more comfortable to carry and use. So this fits right into that philosophy. And I've wanted a Nyala for quite a long time. I ultimately ended up picking this guy up from Thunderbird Gear in Bolton, Ontario. I've talked to Steve lots of times. Really good guy. One of these days I'm going to go down to his shop and do like a full shop tour. It's a bit of a drive, and so it's hard to work out the scheduling for it. But I am going to do it one of these days. Anyway, if you're looking for one, he doesn't have any in stock, and neither does really most places. These have been discontinued, which I'm rather sad to say. You're going to have to look on the secondary market, and at this point, there's still a fair number of them around. If you really want one, if you've got a couple of days to wait, you're not going to be able to impulse buy one. But if you wait a little bit, check the fixed blade forums on Blade Forums, check other places that you usually buy your knives from, and you should be able to lay your hands on a used one. All right, so now that we've gotten that little bit of introduction out of the way, I guess I should also point out that this is not the only version of the Nyala. This is the brown micarta with the Insingo. There's also black micarta, and you can get this in a drop point blade as well. Okay, so now let's get to size and weight. We'll call that introduction finished. And this knife is going to be 8 3/4 inches, 3 3/4 inches on the blade, 5 inches on the handle, weigh in around 6 ounces. So hefty little guy, but honestly, 6 ounces when you're carrying this on your belt is not a big deal. And you guys have heard me say before, I often carry folders that are 6 ounces in my pocket, so I'm certainly not going to complain about it on my belt. All right. The grip area on this is a little smaller. It's about 3 3/4 inches, which may be a little small for some hands. Now you still got this area back here. So if you had these massive hands, and you could get a pinky back here and sort of, it would still accommodate you. All right, so not a big problem. Let's, though, talk about this blade. I really love this blade. Okay, so this is the Insingo blade shape. Obviously, you can see a little bit of a top swedge here, stonewash finish, hollow grind. Now, it's a little thicker behind the edge, but because of the hollow grind and because of the edge geometry, the angle that they've got there, it's actually pretty darn comfortable. Nice big sharpening choil, so this is going to last you a long time. And Reeve does this sort of slight hollow grind, where it's not a crazy aggressive hollow grind, and it works really well for cutting performance. And this guy cuts like crazy. I can tell you, I purposely went out and cut up a couple of squash with this knife, because squash is one of those things that you want a blade that slices well, but it's so tough that you often end up pounding your knife into it with almost like batoning your knife through squash. So this actually performed really well. And although it's not really meant to be a kitchen knife, it'll do those jobs because it's just so well balanced. And that's what I have to say is probably my favorite thing about this knife is just the balance of it. It's not too big, it's not too small. It's sort of one of those Goldilocks knives where everything is just right. If you do want to do some feather sticking, hold on, I gotta get some of the crappy bark off this first. There we go. You know, if you're going to do a feather stick, it's got thin enough geometry that you can easily get those feathers when you're not behind a camera. This is a lot easier. There you go. But you can see we can get those feathers to happen pretty nicely. And if we were going to sit here for the next half hour making feathers, I know that would get really boring for you guys. Kind of boring for me too, but it's worth your while if you're trying to start a fire in less than ideal conditions. Anyway, you can see I can get those little curly cues to happen pretty easily, but in addition to that, if I needed to make some kindling out of this, let's see if I can get it to where it's actually on screen. There we go. Move this back a little. Try to do this without smacking the camera or the tripod. I'm not sure how successful that's going to be, but there you go. And you can see, you know, I'm pretty confident. Like you could do a much bigger piece of material than this because you've got a ton of blade stock there, and that Insingo shape does make it really tough. Let me move over to this log so I can get a better swing without running the risk of smacking my camera or tripod. There we go. So none the worse for wear, and this has held up really, really well. And that's, again, I love just the overall balance of this. It feels like a knife that you could really have this as a one-tool option and do really a lot more. You know, if you wanted to do some cross-cutting or something like that, this would definitely do it. Again, I would use a saw or a hatchet, but this is going to be a really, really handy tool. The one thing that we've talked about when I've already mentioned this a bit, but this blade is not ideally suited for skinning. There's just not a lot of belly there, but really anything apart from that, this is going to be just great. And of course, the quality of it and the beauty of it means that, you know, this is a knife that you could treat as a family heirloom almost. It's just beautiful. All right, so that's the blade. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess I should talk about the jimping here, which is fairly big but not super sharp. It definitely does its job. And then you've got this nice crowned spine, which does allow you, if you ever wanted to kind of get your finger out here and have a comfortable resting place even further out, or to do this kind of thing. Crowned spine is just a really, really, it's not focusing on that very well. There we go, really, really nice touch. And that crowning, although it's, you know, now it's just rounded, but the whole tang is nicely rounded, and we've got some jimping in a couple of strategic locations here. Really, really nicely textured micarta. And it almost looks like it would be, I don't know, too tough. My son says this looks like a tree, so it must be a knife for outdoors, Dad, because it reminds me of a tree, and that's what it's meant for cutting. But the handle feels fantastic in hand. It's just simple and plain, you know, very hand filling, but not overly so. Great in hammer grip, saber grip, you know, if you're going to do some draw cutting, or maybe you're going to do cross the chest type of stuff like that. Really, really comfortable in pretty well any grip you could think of. There is a lanyard hole, and this does come with a lanyard on it, which is a great big long lanyard, and I just got rid of that right away. It annoyed me the minute I took it out of the box, so that had to go. Otherwise, though, fantastic. Let's go ahead now and look at the sheath. The sheath really matches this knife. So this is definitely a natural sort of outdoors looking knife. You know, and well, I love Kydex, and you know, in some ways I would prefer a Kydex sheath for all knives, because this doesn't get EDC'd a lot. And I have EDC'd it a couple of times, but it's a little too much, frankly, for what I think of as an EDC knife. I guess with a Kydex sheath, maybe in scout carry, you could definitely do it, and it would be very capable. I'm not saying, you know, I mean, it's a great cutting tool, but all I'm pointing out here is because I normally carry this when I'm hiking or doing something out in the bush or working around the yard, it's not as critical that it has a Kydex sheath. Now, maybe in the future, you know, I will do a Kydex sheath for it just to see how it works as an EDC fixed blade. Right now, if I'm EDCing this, I'll either one, wear a belt, or two, I have just tucked this in my pocket and carried it around, and it works pretty well that way too. The sheath the retention is quite good. Now you can see there's a lot of handle in there, so you've got lots of surface area to get a little bit of grip developed there. We've got a couple little holes here that can serve to, you know, lash this to something, or you've got a little hole here that you can use to tie this around your leg or something like that. Nicely put together sheath. It's always nice to see a really good looking sheath. You know, that's one of the things that, you know, I feel like a fixed blade, you know, the sheath makes or breaks the knife, because if the sheath is bad, what are you going to do? Like, you can't carry it, and it kind of ruins the whole experience. So a good sheath is really, really important, and this one does a nice job. I have treated this, by the way, with a bit of Neat's foot oil so that, you know, the leather can stay the way I want it rather than to wear out too much. And I will redo that on a semi-regular basis. All right, every time I don't carry the knife for a while, or when it starts to feel a little bit dry, you know, we'll retreat that. But yeah, big fan of the sheath. I think it fits the knife really, really well. Now let's go ahead and get to some comparisons. And I've got a fair number of comparisons here, most of which, yeah, I think all of which you've seen before. So here's something similar in terms of purpose, but a little smaller. So this is the Jesse Jaros Globetrotter. Again, a knife that I really, really like. I'm a big fan of Jaros's work. And we've got this Kydex sheath for it by Brown Industries. So a little smaller, a little more suited for EDC, but I thought it would make a nice comparison, or to give that option of, hey, if you do want something that is going to fill the role of an EDC knife, let's grab something a little more budget friendly and throw it in here for a second. This is the Steel Will Roamer, and this guy's in D2 steel. This is, I think, the 305 Roamer. There are a few different ones. This is a pretty nicely done blade, and this might be something that would, you know, interest you if you're going, yeah, Kevin, you know, I'm not interested in spending the kind of money that is going to have to be spent on a Nyala, but I do want a decent outdoor fixed blade. I like this one quite a bit. I find for a budget knife, it's pretty versatile. We've talked about Moras a lot on the channel recently, and I like the Mora, but I find this, because it's got the regular grind, can be a little more versatile. It can still do the bushcrafting stuff, not quite as well as the Moras, but then if you need to do some food prep or skin an animal or something like that, you've still got that option. And I guess the Mora could do an okay job at skinning as well, but I don't love the Scandi grind for that. Sorry about no knives on in frame half the time here, guys, but when you're working behind a tripod with one hand, it can get a little awkward. So there's the Mora Bushcraft Black, a great budget option. Obviously, these are not comparable in terms of really anything, materials or price or anything. Kind of similar philosophy, although I think this is a little more versatile. But because the Mora is so well known, I feel like it works well to bring in as a comparison, because everyone's going to kind of, even if you don't own one, you'll have seen lots of them either on other videos or when you're doing your knife shopping. So everyone should be kind of familiar with that. All right, next up is another knife that I enjoy an awful lot. Similar size, but a little bit bigger. Okay, this is the Topz Idaho Hunter. More of a, obviously, you know, big full belly to serve as a hunting knife. Now, it's heavy duty, so it's sort of, you know, it's got that survival role as well. This is, I feel like I have to say this every time. So you look at this knife handle and you go, what in the world is that? But I have to tell you guys, this is one of the nicest knife handles in hand you will ever experience. It's just amazing. Even though it's so weird looking, it's actually a fantastic knife. So I thought I'd bring that in for a comparison. If you wanted something a little bit bigger, or perhaps something that would do some of those skinning tasks for you, that might be a good option. 1095 steel, so that's another significant difference. And it's going to be cheaper. Now, the Topz is not a budget option, but it's definitely not as costly. Last but not least, let's bring in my other competitor for favorite fixed blade, and that is the Lion Steel M4. For those of you who have repeatedly suggested I try a B35 and now a B41, I'm working on it, guys, and I will get both of those knives eventually. I will bring this in for comparison. These are very close, and I have a full comparison video, so I'm not going to say a lot about that. I love these two knives. They're really probably the two favorite fixed blades in my collection right now. Okay, so there we go, guys. That's my full review and discussion of the Chris Reeve Knives Nyala. A totally great knife. Really sad that this is discontinued. As I said, you can still find one on the secondary market. If you are looking for something else, okay, use the links down in the description box. That does help the channel. Both of those channel sponsors do a lot of great stuff and allow me to continue to bring you this content. So huge thanks to them, and thank you to you guys for patronizing them. And in conclusion, let me say that, I think this is a great single tool option. If you want a knife that can go with you on every hike and every bike ride to just ride on your belt and do any task you can think of doing with a knife, this is a great option. Now, as I've said, the Insingo blade shape is probably not ideal as a skinning knife. Not probably, definitely not. There is, of course, a drop point option that's going to do a little better job of that. But outside of that, all right, and I don't know about you guys, but for me, I know when I'm going hunting. I don't just accidentally start hunting. So I kind of know, okay, don't carry this knife because you're going to have to gut something, or you're going to need that meat processing power, and I know when I'm not going to need it. So for me, this works really well. All right, guys, thanks a lot for watching. I'd love to hear your comments down below. Do you have a Nyala? Have you tried one? Do you want one? Are you sad as well that it's discontinued? Let me know down in the comments. We'll talk to you soon.